Good afternoon. I'm Alex Mozed, founder, CEO of Applico, co-author of Modern Monopolies, along with Nick Johnson, also co-author on Modern Monopolies. We're on Winner Take All, and we're going to talk about B2B marketplaces in the industrial supply and MRO space specifically. And now the really interesting thing about MRO, which is maintenance, repair, and operations, is it's over $100 billion industry just in the United States. I would say it's probably the tip of the spear when it comes to thinking about marketplace platform models coming into B2B distribution. A few years ago, there was a court case that Amazon had to release internal memos. In those internal memos, Amazon had specifically called out the office supply space, the MRO space, as being essentially a greenfield opportunity for Amazon Business, that's their B2B marketplace version of Amazon, to basically have a open field with little to no competition. And they were trying to sprint as fast as they could to get penetration and market share in B2B. Now, if we just take a high level look at all the different types of B2B marketplaces, we have this landscape here providing an overview. You have your Amazon Business, your eBay Business as kind of the overarching players in the space. We also have Alibaba in the space. So those would really be the three big tech platforms that are in B2B in general. Alibaba did a partnership with Office Depot earlier this year. The explanation for the partnership was that Office Depot was able to tap into Alibaba's supply, all of the different third-party sellers and distributors and manufacturers that you would typically affiliate with Alibaba and Taobao and Tmall and their marketplaces. In China, Alibaba is very, very strong and very penetrated in the B2B marketplace space. Now, what Office Depot is bringing to the table for Alibaba was demand. And I don't think that many business customers in the US typically would think, let me go to Alibaba. They bought a company called OpenSky maybe about a year and a half ago towards the end of 2017 and are trying to use that as Alibaba's positioning in B2B in the US. So I think Alibaba in general in the US has a little bit of a demand challenge. Clearly, that's why they're doing a tie-up with Office Depot. I think Alibaba got the better end of the deal on Office Depot. I feel like, again, if I'm playing this chicken and egg game, what is harder? What is the more advantageous asset in building a B2B marketplace? At least in the, say, beginning to mid stages, I'd say it's definitely on the demand side in the sense that I feel like Office Depot, if they really wanted to, could have solved for supply a lot easier than, say, Alibaba solving for demand. So
certainly in the US.
Earlier this year, we published an article. This was last summer. We published the article that was predicting that Amazon Business would cross the $10 billion in GMV threshold on MDM. And then later in the fall of 2018, Amazon came out and confirmed that. So MDM had that before anyone else. And the interesting thing about Amazon Business's growth in this space is that they're growing at 20%. Not 20% a year, not 20% a quarter, but 20% a month. So when we look at where we expect Amazon to be in 2019, that's where these stats start to get a little scary when projecting that out. At Amazon at $10 billion in GMV, that already put Amazon into the top 20 distributors overall, not just in MRO, but overall for B2B distribution.
In the US, right?
All of this, yes, in the US. And, basically that put them right where Grainger is. We have Grainger a hair ahead of Amazon. But it's really a rounding error at that point. So
it's worth noting to Amazon within a year, they went to $1 billion in sales within the first year. And then in the next 2 years after that, they went from $1 billion to $10 billion. and they're still growing very quickly.
So there's a good interview with eBay's head of eBay business at the end of June. And in that article, what she talks about is that eBay has about $4 billion in GMV. Now that's spread out across a lot of categories, not just industrial. She lists here electronics, automotive, parts, home and garden, business and industrial categories. So they're spread across a lot of areas. We've talked about this before. I think eBay's challenge, big challenge in being successful in B2B is that eBay doesn't really do linear e-com in the sense that eBay doesn't buy inventory, keep it on their balance sheet and resell it. They're not a linear e-commerce player, really. It's all marketplace. It's all inventory contributed by third-party sellers.
And with that, they don't have a lot of fulfillment capabilities, right? Because they're not selling their own products. Amazon basically serves as customer number one for its fulfillment capabilities, but then it opens that up to all the other sellers.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, I mean, eBay has a good foothold, but I think until eBay tries to figure out these two things around actually fusing the linear distribution model with the platform marketplace model, as well as the fulfillment side of the equation, they're just going to have a tough time to reach the scale and ultimately to satisfy the needs of the business customer in a way that an Amazon business could do or is already doing, you could argue. So other news in the industrial supply space, everyone talks a lot about Grainger. Everyone talks a lot about what Gamut is doing, which is a Grainger business. They also have Zorro, which is more international and in Asia, I think. There's a JV Zorro, right?
I think isn't Zorro in the UK?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Zorro's in the UK. And but Grainger is not a marketplace. Gamut's not a marketplace. But this is all linear e-com, right? All of these products you would find somewhere on Grainger's balance sheet. They're buying these products. They're reselling these products. And what that means is they're just not able to get the amount of scale that you get in a marketplace. So in a recent release, DG, the CEO of Grainger, talked about how many additional SKUs that they were adding. I think this was maybe this spring of 2019. Said they added about 200,000 SKUs in the quarter, and there's about 800,000 SKUs in the pipeline, and they're really ramping things up. Now, let's draw a comparison to Amazon's Jeff Bezos' annual shareholder letter in April of this year, looking at the 2018 year. But also, what was interesting in this letter is for the first time, he broke out the percentage of 3P third-party seller sales from 1999 through 2018. You see, starting at 3%, now ending up at 58%. And when you look at what that means, right, he outlines here, third-party sales grew from $100 million to $160 billion in that period of time. When you look at the scale of SKUs for what that entails, I mean, it is mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling just in terms of how wide and how long that long tail is. And unless you embrace the marketplace model, unless you build an ecosystem of third-party sellers, you're just never going to have that same level of scale.
200,000 SKUs might sound great, but if you compare that to the breadth that something like Amazon brings to the table, even in one vertical, it's a drop in the bucket.
Exactly. The other thing is that, that's value prop 1, scale and breadth of product catalog. Value prop 2 is pricing and low prices. Because you have everyone competing over the buy box, because you have all of these third-party sellers that can now compete to sell the same products, what that means is they are now driving that price down. And who's the beneficiary? The customer. And so that means that Amazon's internal buyers and sellers are inherently in a huge amount of competition with the third-party sellers on Amazon's marketplace. And that's something that Jeff Bezos here really calls out, is that the marketplace has actually been beating their internal buying and selling function year over year. And that's one of the things that he's most impressed about. And they just can't go up against it. Here, in this paragraph right here. Why did independent sellers do so much better selling on Amazon than they did on eBay? And why were independent sellers able to grow so much more quickly? He says, we helped independent sellers compete against our first-party business by investing in and offering them the very best selling tools we could imagine and build. There are so many tools. fulfilled by Amazon would be one of them. We could not foresee with certainty what those programs would eventually look like, but they were pushed forward with intuition and optimism. Basically, what he's getting at is the third-party sellers have continued to confound even Jeff Bezos as to how successful they've been to innovate, to be creative, to find new products that their customers want, to drive prices down on those mainline SKUs. We have a white paper called the Amazon Business Teardown. And in that white paper, we've been tracking the number of third-party sellers selling on Amazon Business since 2017 now. Our latest publication on this was looking through the year of 2018. And we've lumped together a few categories in this graph here: industrial, tools, and automotive. And what you can see, industrial now has over 55,000 sellers just in industrial. And that grew from about 45,000. Then it dipped in mid of 2017. Why did it dip? Because I think Amazon did a big purge where they were kind of removing inactive sellers or fraudulent sellers, right, and kind of pruning the marketplace out. So you have 45,000. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you look at what it dipped down to, so yes, they had 45,000 in March of 2017. It dipped down to maybe about 27,000 after pruning it, right? So they scrubbed about 20,000 sellers. So if you go from 27,000 to almost 60,000 in less than a year and a half, I mean, that is a huge amount of onboarding. And if you then start to, the numbers aren't specific in terms of what's the average number of products or SKUs that a third-party sellers sells on Amazon, just in the industrial space. But when you just start to run the numbers and you say, hey, what is a small MRO B2B distributor usually sell in-house, and how much of that are they putting on Amazon? I mean, when you're growing 30,000+ sellers in a year and a half, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of products that these third-party sellers are adding into the Amazon Business MRO Marketplace, which is impressive and really speaks to the power of the 3P third-party seller marketplace. And so I think unless an incumbent B2B distributor really embraces the third-party seller model, particularly in MRO, which now is probably the tip of the spear in terms of where we're going to see this disruption hit first. Why is that? Over 90% of the products in an MRO product catalog are what we would call highly commoditized. They're very easily pack and shippable. They can be distributed from, a handful of centralized distribution or fulfillment centers throughout the United States, maybe more than a handful, but you get the point. It's not heavy. It's not regional distribution. It can be centralized.
Doesn't require specialized fulfillment capabilities. This is the kind of stuff that Amazon has long excelled at doing. And it's basically just selling it to a different type of customer in a different industry. But in terms of its existing infrastructure, MRO seems pretty plug and play, right?
Pretty plug and play. Not too much additional investment that Amazon needs to make from an infrastructure standpoint. This is why Walmart is losing $1 billion a year investing in infrastructure on really the fulfillment capability to go up against the e-commerce infrastructure and distribution infrastructure that Amazon has built up over 25 years. So, we'll see where this nets out. I still think that a B2B distributor in the MRO space could definitely retain either the number 1 or number 2 slot. Right now, it's probably more likely that they get the number 2 slot
behind Amazon
Business. I just think it's going to be tough, even at this point, to unseat Amazon as the number 1 slot in a marketplace model in MRO. But honestly, even if you look at what Walmart's doing, if Walmart goes down as the number 2 overall B2C marketplace player behind Amazon, that transition will go down as one of the best business transformations in the past 50 years. The other interesting thing is if you get a foothold in MRO, now you could actually start to expand into adjacent product categories that a typical MRO industrial supply distributor may not be getting into or may not be in at all.
So what are those categories?
I would say things that would be complementary, things that would fit that similar infrastructure and distribution model, that fulfillment model. That could be in electrical supplies. That could be in kind of, different tooling and parts, accessories, things that, again, fit that pack and ship model. Probably, if you look at just the customer base that you have and you say, what are other complementary products that maybe I'm not fulfilling today, but I could be fulfilling? There's a lot of different potential there to expand or let other third-party sellers post that inventory into your marketplace and expand into new verticals that maybe you're not already in today. So it doesn't actually need to be entirely cannibalistic. That's point one. Point two on why it's not entirely cannibalistic is because a lot of these customers that you're servicing, especially if you're a large B2B MRO distributor, you probably have a lot of contract business with a lot of large customers. You definitely have mid-sized customers. You definitely also have a spot business. But I would bet that a lot of the initial customers on a B2B marketplace, even in MRO, that you're acquiring online, these customers, we are going to find a lot of small buyers.
Right.
You're going to find a lot of buyers that maybe you don't even have a customer tiering system internally to actually quantify how small these people are.
Right. They're too small to have ever gotten a visit from a rep. They haven't registered on your radar, but online, that barrier to selling them is so much lower. And the unit economics of dealing with this customer is different online than in the old offline world. It starts to become economical and interesting to bring this new customer into the fold, particularly in the marketplace model.
Mm-hmm. Last note on this is, Amazon relatively recently won Stanford University as a customer. Why this is an issue? Stanford University would typically be seen as a large customer that has a lot of nuanced needs. They have probably 30 or 40 different procurement or buying or college purchasing departments. All have their own different requirements. And this is the definition of a customer that needs that high value add service, that really high touch dynamic, which is what the large B2B distributors have been touting as a big differentiator between them and Amazon.
They've been saying for a long time, the large customers aren't going to leave us. We don't worry about that. Turns out that's not always true, right?
And this is what Amazon did. They said, okay, well, hey, Stanford. So if you want to be Stanford wanted to be able to buy a lot of locally produced goods or locally sold goods. Also have requirements around minority-owned businesses or women-owned businesses. And so what Amazon said is, okay, well, if you can't find these products in our marketplace, then we're just going to assign you a couple people full-time. And if you can't find it, they'll go out and find it for you. And so basically what we're seeing is that Amazon has been able to automate a lot of the purchasing and procurement requirements. And they have a report that says that they were able to reduce the manual labor associated with kind of procurement and compliance by 50% because they have all the tools and tech that they can then, basically pass that down to all the different departments, let them put in all their requirements, and boom.
There's a lot of value there that happens outside of just the purchase price, which they're also delivering on too. Then
you're getting the best purchase price, the widest product catalog. And then, hey, if you need that extra white glove service, that value add service, here are two people. And we're going to invest in that. So now what we're starting to see is the role for the marketplace, but then how they can layer in the value add service on top of that. Not to mention, they've already done things around providing credit to business customers and all these other kinds of things that you might not typically, or not. You also have volume discounts. If you're making a big purchase, you can then request a volume discount from that seller. So they've been able to bake in a lot of these things that you may not have typically thought would exist in a marketplace. And so as a result of that, one of the research analyst firms that I was talking to said, this value add service as a barrier to entry for a large distributor to have against a marketplace like Amazon, that actually just got weakened a lot by the Stanford University story. And so these analysts actually stopped referencing that in their equity research reports about B2B distributors, especially in MRO.
Right. For a long time, it was the story was, oh yeah, Amazon isn't going to do value-added service in B2B. They're not going to hire reps. Doesn't fit the Amazon model. Turns out Amazon model is pretty adaptable, right? When it comes to taking on new industries, the opportunity is big enough. Getting a customer like a Stanford University, they're going to figure it out.
Now, I mean, when you look at just the last point here, advantages that MRO distributors have to actually go and embrace a B2B marketplace model. I mean, let's look at Gamut. It's a separate brand, which gives them a lot of flexibility in terms of trying out new things that you may not want to try on, say, a Grainger.com property.
Right. They're trying out different pricing models and things that Grainger proper isn't doing yet.
Exactly. You just have a lot more flexibility when you have some brand separation. That's why I think one of the big reasons Walmart Marketplace failed in 2009. And you have a lot of demand. If you're a large B2B MRO distributor, you have a brand, you have demand. And that means that if you also have a lot of relationships just in the industry with other distributors, manufacturers, suppliers that you could then start to market to and say, hey, we have a separate property here. We're going to try out a new model. Come and post some inventory on here. And
you've also got a lot of tools too, right? You have technology that a lot of some of those smaller guys that you want to come sell with you, they don't have it. If you give it to them, that might be something interesting to get them to say, hey, not only am I going to get new customers, but I get some stuff that helps me run my business better.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, they have a lot of advantages, but just purely staying on the path of doing linear e-com and trying to use that to beat Amazon Business or another B2B marketplace, it just simply won't work. We've seen the script play out. We're now 25 years into it on the B2C side. Walmart is investing heavily in this, and I think they're doing a good job. We just saw Foot Locker put $100 million into GOAT maybe a few months ago. I mean, some of the B2C retailers are starting to figure it out. Granted, it took them over 20 years to do it, but this is the thing that B2B could learn from and embrace. You're really only 3-4 years into Amazon Business coming in, and that's a big advantage. You can still win. Not 3 people can win. Only 2 can win because this is a winner-take-all dynamic. But who wants to be number 2 in MRO?
We'll see.